The Dream. A Boy with Nothing But a Dream. Written by Sam Aun and Marianne Seymour. Read by Kevin Utter. Introduction. I am addicted to reading. I constantly read many books. At one point I finished 21 books in 1 year, and I tried to find the best spiritual and business books in the world to continue to feed my reading desire. While I was researching for it, I prayed to God and asked as many friends as possible to help me find the best authors. I Googled every university to look for business professors and great ministers who wrote books so I could learn from their successes. I literally had found what I looked for. From each one of those books I learned something, but one thing that most authors suggested was keeping a daily journal. It would be a powerful way to understand who we are, what we have done, what our strengths were, and which weakness we need to work on, because life is one circle. It sometimes will hand us the same issue that we had dealt with before, and sometimes there will be a brand new challenge that we also should learn from and take a note of it, because that circle will go and come again and again. It made sense to me, so I started to write my journal. When I got 30 pages, I started to like my story. I went back to reread and corrected grammar. I saw how I was raised, how I grew up in a tough situation, the reason I converted to be Christian, my passion about education. My first step went to college. I owned a business, moved to the United States, married to a beautiful woman. I became U.S. citizenship. I served an international mission. I have a passion to own a large corporation to do business around the country. I thought my story was too precious to not share, and that's exactly what this book is all about. A boy with nothing became everything. What he has had to start with was just a dream. I believe if I made it to the top of this mountain, life, everybody could make it too. God loves all creation. We share the same space, live in the same world, have the same opportunities, have one sun to light the day and one moon to light the night, 24 hours a day, 12-hour nights and 12-hour days, one God, one world, one life to share the benefits we have been given. But the separation between rich and poor, smart and foolish, sad and happy, cheerful and rude is the desire to choose. We do have a chance to choose. Life is one circle, one shot. It doesn't matter how we were born, how we were raised, and how we left the earth. We came to the world with empty hands, and we will leave the earth with nothing. On the other hand, it doesn't matter how much money we have. No one on this planet will to take the money with him when they die. So what does it really matter? The answer is the life in between. How do we use this life? How great we want to be? How much we want to learn? How far we want to go? How much we want to have? The freedom of choice I called the dream. Each one of us is born with it. It is hiding in us. This book will not be published if it is not my own experiences, or if my dream didn't come to pass. But I got what I dreamed for, and it was real. I had the dream, and I got exactly what I dreamed for. The first thing I wanted to do when got to the top of the mountain was to share my true story with people who were seeking help. I hope this book will be a key to unlock what you dream for, and only one request I have for you is not to give up on God. Please pray and ask Him to help you. Ask Him if your dream is pleasing Him. When you know that is a good dream, that dream will help you, your family, your community, and your country to prosper. You should stick with it. I assure you, it will come to pass. It might take a little bit longer than what we wanted, but this doesn't mean that God is not ready for us. It's His pleasure to bless us. And of course, we're not ready to handle a new dimension of life changing, yet God is teaching us to trust His timing, His grace, and His power. He is looking for someone who is having enough faith just like us, so he can use his power to transform us to be a hero for this negation. Let me share with you my truth journey with Jesus. Chapter 1. A Boy and His Childhood. I was born and grew up in a good-sized village in Cambodia, about an hour away from Phnom Penh. I lived with my mother and father and 3 brothers, 1 older and 2 younger. Our life was good. We lived in a nice house, the biggest in the village. I had more opportunities than the other kids in my community. My dad owned a very successful fertilizer business, and my job was just hanging out with my friends and recruiting neighbors to help my mom count money that would be piled on the carpet in one of the rooms of our long house. Dad made so much money from the fertilizer sales that on some days we had no room to walk through the house due to the money filling up the carpet. Unfortunately, this success did not last long, and the year before I graduated from primary school, about the age of 11, my dad lost his business. In just one moment, my family's economic world collapsed. We lost everything, and my dad went missing with no explanation. Everyone thought he was dead. My mother cried easily, and none of us knew what was happening. No one could explain things to us. 2 days after my father disappeared, one of my father's close friends came to us and told my mother that my father's business partner was cheating him. My father had been trying to enlarge his business by selling fertilizer across the Mekong River into Vietnam. The Vietnamese business partner and his associates had taken a loaded ferry the business used to transport the fertilizer and left the port on the Mekong River without any explanation. My father had been looking for them, and the friend was not sure whether he was still alive or had been killed by the partner and his associates. My mother lost control when she heard what had happened to our father, and she cried constantly. Her tears fell day and night. She no longer ate or talked. About a week later, our father came back to us, but he would say nothing. He didn't want to leave the house. I didn't ask him what happened, nor did anybody else. Everybody was in silent shock. Slowly, he told us what had happened, but we were just glad that we hadn't lost him. Dad wanted to take responsibility for what had happened and started to sell everything we owned to pay off the business debts. Our big house was now empty. There was still one big bill to be paid to the government, the delivery truck fee. Finally, our father decided to sell the big, beautiful house in the village. Our entire family moved to another town, except they left my older brother, Sam Aun, and me to watch the big empty property until it was sold. My brother and I went to school during the day. I was in the last year of primary school, and he was in high school. School started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the students could buy breakfast at school. School went until noon, leaving the afternoon for doing homework or taking part-time classes. My brother, being in secondary school, had many friends and was quite social. He and his friends often did things together in the evenings, leaving me alone in the big empty house. Sometimes I would imagine there were scary things with me in the dark, and since there was no electricity, it was dark every night. I was scared of a lot of things, of my shadow, of noises, of the reflections of the oil lamp, of the scurrying of the mice in the ceiling, and of the things in my imagination. I wanted to stay in the safety of my bed and didn't want to get up. Sometimes I even peed on myself rather than going out into the outside bathroom. Whenever possible, I tried to spend the nights with the families of my friends so I would not have to stay alone and be so scared. It took almost 2 years to sell the house, and it finally sold the year I graduated from primary school. I was 12 years old at that time. After the property sold, our family was reunited. and my high school journey started right then. The school was much further away from home than my primary school had been. It now took me much longer to get there. I was so excited to be going to school with my older brother. In the year 2000, I graduated from high school with a very good score. I was the pride of my family, and especially of my mother. There were not many students who passed the final exam that year, but I made it. Yes, I did. All the way through the 12th grade. Now it was another big challenge for my family and me, because while I was crying for wanting to go to college, they still were struggling with little or nothing to eat. I remember sometimes we had a very late meal because we still didn't have enough money for a kilo of rice to cook for lunch. How could they support me to go to college? I dreamed about university every night, and one of my close friends from high school, Sophony, had a chance to go to college. On the way back home from attending classes, Sophony stopped by my house and told me everything about his university week after week. One day after he left my house, I cried very hard. I mean really hard. I shouted I hated my life and my family situation. In frustration, I threw every one of my beloved high school books into the bushes of my backyard and promised myself that I would never think of college ever again. It was impossible for me. It would never happen, and that was it. No word could describe my passion. No exit to turn the situation around. My dream totally died in the broken house. There was no more wishing for me in this poor tiny world of mine. Sometimes Sophony still stopped by and told me about college. I asked him once if he would let me go with him to his school. I wanted so badly to see what his university was all about. He let me go with him, even though I could only stand outside of the school gates and wait for him. The university was huge, with many students, and all of them in very nice and clean uniforms. I stood watching everybody's activities and read the university's sign. The Royal University of Law and Economics attracted my eyes 1,000 times. We returned home after his classes, and the next day I asked him if I could go again. He let me go every day, and I willingly waited outside 5 hours for him. Waiting that long didn't seem burdensome to me. I got to know some people who were selling snacks in front of the school building. I often offered to help them unload the water bottles from their truck. I also sometimes tried to count how many motorcycles and bicycles used the left smaller entrance to the university in the morning, instead of the more crowded front entrance. After a month, I did get a little bored, so I asked Sophony if I could use his motorbike while he was in class so that I might find a part-time English class. He said okay, and I found a place that taught English where I could pay per hour. The charge was 5 cents US for an hour, yet sometimes I still had no money to pay for the class. When I didn't have money, I waited until class filled up, because then I could stand outside and listen without having to pay. Most of the time, I watched and listened outside the room. That was how I learned to speak English. One day, a new friend from English class told me about a Christian organization teaching English for free. This sounded amazing to a boy hungry for education, but with no money, like me, so I went to the school the next day. But every class was full. There was only one class with available seats. It was held on the open-air roof at noontime, but students had to grab seats early because all 200 filled quickly and there was no outside space to stand. I was never late and always got a good front seat. That class was taught by a volunteer from the United States. In class every Thursday, the teacher, Jessie, talked about Jesus, about how much Jesus loved people and the entire world. The teacher talked on and on every week. At that time, I hated Christianity because I was a very strong Buddhist. I grew up in a family that for generations had worshipped Buddha and no other god, but I couldn't deny the truth he said about Christ. A few months later, he invited some of us into his special half-hour Bible class. I didn't like the idea, but I wanted to practice my English. I was impressed because Jesse was nice, gentle, and cool. His entire demeanor made me want to grow up to be like him. Also, he was passionate about teaching. He actually taught this class during his lunchtime from his other job as a private school manager. So I went to that class. He asked us to read the book of Genesis and explained how God created the world. I still wasn't interested, but Jesse continued. I grilled him with many questions, and he still remained cool and collected, always giving me very polite answers. One Thursday we were studying the book of Matthew. He told us that Jesus Christ lives, that he is listening and watching over us. He is just waiting to help us. This got a little bit of my attention. I asked him if I could ask Christ to help me go to college. I accepted Christ to be my Lord when I was 20. It was the same year the world celebrated the beginning of the 21st century, a big celebration at that time. I prayed my first prayer to God to help me go to college. My family did not know that I had become a Christian. At my house, while my family was involved with other things, I prayed loudly in my bumbling English so they could not understand me and would not know what I was doing. Sure enough, when we celebrated the Cambodian New Year in April of 2000, God answered my prayer through my mother. She gave me $100 to pay for a year of college, but she made it clear that she could not pay for transportation, course books, lunches, uniforms, or next year's school payment. My mom warned me that I should not come crying to her for anything else, that she had done everything for me that she could. I made a deal with her that day to accept her offer. In February, a few months after buying the school, Irene called me, asking for my help to be a translator for the Rocky Mountain United Methodist medical mission team that would be coming to Cambodia. I asked her if she was sure that I could do that job because I had no training for medical technical words. She said she trusted me and she had complete confidence in my abilities. I asked her to give me a few days to think about it. I wasn't as nervous about translating the technical words as much as I was because I had just started my school, and I would now need to leave for 2 weeks with no general manager to take my place. I prayed to God, which I have always done before making decisions. Deep in my heart, I knew that God wanted me to go. So I called Irene back and agreed to take the volunteer job. I left school for 2 weeks to follow God's will. I believed that God blessed both me and my school, and that He was in charge. All would happen according to His will. My translating work took place in the Kratchis province in northeastern Cambodia at a medical clinic. In April of 2009, the medical team arrived and the clinic opened. I was so ready for the job. I was ready to take on this important calling from God. I put my worries about my school behind and called my receptionist only once a day to make sure nothing really bad had happened. I did not inquire about money made, but asked straightforward if any kids had gotten injured on the playground, because the government would shut the school down if any accidents happened to the kids and a director was not on the school property to take responsibility. I had a wonderful time and many incredible experiences with the mission team. The team from the U.S. was made up of 20 volunteers and was divided into different teams with different responsibilities: eye clinic, dental clinic, and general health. I primarily worked for the eye clinic team. Jane Buchanan was our eye team leader, and Dr. Bob, Jane's husband, was the main doctor in the team. In the eye clinic, we tested for distance vision, close-up vision, and general eye problems such as cataracts. Records were kept on the patients, so if they returned for services with subsequent mission trips, their health history could be tracked. We worked continually and saw many, many patients. Both the Cambodian and the American teams appreciated my work. Carol Brown, a young woman from the U.S. who worked with the eye team, gave me a great deal of attention. Everyone on the mission team was very nice to me and tried to see that I had anything I needed. But Carol was especially attentive. She brought me food and fruit for every mealtime. I did more than just act as an interpreter for the team and did many extra tasks, and I thought maybe she too was just doing extra things for others. However, she followed me and appeared interested in everything I did. I kept wondering why this girl liked me that much and why she was being so nice. Chapter 2. Moving to the United States of America. Moving to the United States was beyond my dream, beyond my imagination. I never imagined that this would happen. I had not yearned to go to the United States since I was young, had not made it one of my long-term goals. However, this was God's plan, and He hid this blessing from me until the time was right. I realized later that God asked me to leave my school to go on a mission as a test of my faith. Fortunately, I made the right decision to listen and obey His will. This was exactly the same deal that I had agreed to with my mom for the year I went to college. I just trusted God enough for Him to lead my path. On April 1st of 2010, I arrived in the United States. The beautiful brown-haired, blue-eyed Carol was waiting on me at Denver International Airport. When I got off the plane, I didn't know where to go because of so many terminals and exits. Plus, that was my first experience to travel internationally. I totally got lost in the airport. When I figured out to ask directions, someone took me to the train to baggage claim. Carol was waiting when I walked out of the elevator, and I got the best hug and kiss right there. I felt there was no one there that day but just Carol and me. I thought, this is it. This is my dream lady. It was a cold April day. Carol drove me home to Fort Collins along Interstate 25. I saw beautiful towns and the Rocky Mountains covered with snow all the way to Fort Collins. There were nice bridges and buildings all the way up and down the interstate. I never had seen anything like this in Cambodia. When we got to our apartment, it was late afternoon, but it wasn't dark yet, so we did some outside errands. I thought the city had a lot of dead trees. I wondered why they didn't cut them down. I didn't know it was just the end of winter, and the trees didn't have any leaves yet. When I later realized my mistake, I laughed at myself. I started to love Colorado weather from that time. I would be able to see 4 different seasons: white in the winter, colorful blossoms in spring, dark green in summer, yellow and orange leaves falling down in the fall. With the regulations of my visa, we had 90 days after my arrival in which to get married. We got married on June 9th, 2010, at Christ-United Methodist Church in Fort Collins by our pastor, the Reverend Nancy Boswell. All of our friends from the 2009 mission team came to celebrate our wedding, as well as some of our church members. Unfortunately, our parents from both sides could not attend. Carol's parents in Louisiana could not make it at that time, and my parents were in Cambodia. After the wedding service at church, we had a party at an Asian restaurant at the mall in town. Everybody enjoyed the food and had a great time. We received a lot of great gifts, but the best one was from Debbie, our church secretary. She made our wedding bulletin. That was the nicest bulletin ever, with the Cambodian and United States flags on the top, our relationship history inside, with the quote of Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 11, and Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, James chapter 2, verses 14 through 26, and the vows from the marriage. Chapter 4. There were heroes for every generation, and one of the heroes in this generation is you. Chapter 4. The first trip as a missionary. At the mission site, being the first time for me to be one of the team members, I was proud of myself, but I felt I was not as productive as what I wanted to be. Again, I worked for the eye clinic, and Jane Buchanan was our eye team leader. I didn't help Jane very much, but I tried to do a little bit of everything for the other sections. I thought I would learn more by doing that, but afterward I realized that I shouldn't have done that because Jane needed me. A lot of kids were at the clinic playing and running around, some with no t-shirts, some with no flip-flops. I was looking at them and thinking, one of them was me when I grew up. That moment it was amazing. It showed me God's power of how He transformed my life. I felt close to these kids and put myself in one of their places. When you are blessed, remember that it was God who blessed you and not at your own hands. Carol wasn't with me at the clinic site since she was with the construction team building latrines for villagers who lived far away in different communities. We only met each other at dinner time, where the team members could choose to eat with the funds allotted to the team. Both of us spent a lot of time eating with the translators team because they chose more local Cambodian restaurants, while our teams went to more westernized places. After we finished 4 days in 2 different locations, we went to visit Angkor Wat for our weekend break. It was rushed break time. Our pastor Nancy got sick and stayed at the hotel in Siem Reap, so she did not have a chance to see any of the historic sites. When the 3-day break was gone, we headed back to Caracas to start 2 more clinics for another 4 days. After that, we went to Phnom Penh for 1 more day, and then waited for our flight back to Colorado. When we got to Phnom Penh, Carol couldn't wait anymore to have Pip back. She kept asking me, "Where are Mom and Dad? Are they here yet? Are they halfway here?" Finally, around 3 o'clock, my family brought Pip to us at the guest house, where our team stayed to wait for our flights.